It's a late summer day, and you're vacationing in Nova Scotia with your family. Today, you're taking your kids to a place you visited while you were in elementary school. It was a highlight for hundreds of students, including yourself. Now, you want to share that experience by taking your family to a museum in what was once the summer estate of a Nova Scotian Attorney General. You drive up the old post road and are amazed by the expansive grounds in front of you. Then, you are quickly reminded of the awe and wonder you had when you were younger for the enormous Georgian-style home perched at the top of a rolling hill. As you walk up the stairs and across the grand porch, you feel like you've been transported through time and into a Jane Austen novel. Fantasies of seeing Elizabeth Bennet and her sisters doing needlepoint, or a glance of Mr. Darcy walking up the road dance in your head. So you're surprised when a chill runs down your spine and you sense invisible eyes are watching you.
There are guests who claim that they can't go into a room because they feel a presence, or they don't want to go in because they feel like there's something there and they can't go in.
I'm Nadine Bailey, and this is Haunted Canada. Today, we are visiting the Uniacke Estate Museum. Visiting Uniacke Estate is like stepping into early 19th century Nova Scotia. Surrounded by peaceful forests and lakes, the former summer home is located about a 30-minute drive from Halifax, overlooking the shining waters of Lake Martha. It is an ideal destination for history lovers who enjoy traditional homes and for nature lovers who appreciate walking trails, quiet vistas, and a slower pace outside the city. The estate is a rare example of an early 1800s house and landscape and has changed little since they were developed by Richard John Uniacke, who chose the property for its close proximity to the well-traveled road connecting Halifax to Windsor. The route, known as the Old Post Road, is a significant part of Nova Scotia's history. It originated as a Mi'kmaq portage route, which European settlers then used as a stagecoach road, which then became Highway 1. Visitors can still walk along the same road that passed by the house in 1813 on the Post Road Trail, one of 7 Uniacke Estate hiking trails on the expansive property. In the 1800s, travelers would have emerged from a long, rough ride through the undeveloped, dense wilderness through the European ash line avenue and into the spectacular daylight of this well-groomed estate. Richard John Uniacke was one of the most influential Nova Scotians of his day, and he acquired the initial 1,000-acre land grant in 1786. It included a farmhouse and frontage on Lake Martha, but he continued to add to the estate for more than 25 years, and by 1819, the massive property included 11,340 acres. Today's estate is smaller, at 930 hectares, but the property remains home to a variety of wildlife, diverse habitats, and distinct geological features. Richard was accustomed to the finer things, so when he chose this location, he made sure the land and property would be fitting the wealthy land of a landed gentry. He was born on November 22, 1753, in Castleton, Cork County, Ireland, just 4 kilometers from the family estate of Mount Uniacke, created by his grandfather, Captain James Uniacke. He was the 4th son of Norman Uniacke and Alicia Purdon. As the child of a wealthy family, Richard was given every advantage and opportunity possible and went to school at Lismore, County Waterford. When he was 16 years old, Richard became influenced by a Catholic priest, much to the horror of his Protestant family. So his father, sent him to Dublin to work with the law firm of Thomas Guard, and his career path was set. However, while in Dublin, Richard became fascinated with the movement for Irish autonomy and joined the Irish nationalists, causing a rift in the family. Joanne Peppers is with the Uniacke Estate Museum Park, and she said Richard's father cut off his allowance, and when he refused to return home, he fled Ireland penniless to seek his fortune in the New World.
He and his father did not get along, though. Uniacke was a bit more open-minded to a lot of things than his family happened to be, and for partially good reason. His family became Protestant after a while of being Catholic, and of course, if you were a wealthy family in Ireland, you switched over to whatever the crown and the political people happened to be of the time, so they became Protestant. Uniacke remained friends with one of the Catholic priests who lived there, and his father was not too happy about that. He was about 21 years old at this point. Left Ireland.
He traveled to St. Kitts in December 1773, where his older brother was serving in the army, and witnessed the cruelty and hypocrisy of plantations.
Sailed to the West Indies and did not like the slave trade that was going on. That was his first view of slavery. And his whole insight was, how can people treat other people who are essentially the same as them, except for the color of their skin, so differently? He could not understand that. And later on in his career, he would actually make it part of his career not to have slavery introduced into Nova Scotia's laws.
He traveled to Philadelphia in 1774, where he met Moses de Lestonnier, a merchant and businessman who was organizing settlements in the Chinictou area of Nova Scotia, at the head of the Upper Bay of Fundy. He accepted de Lestonnier's invitation, and after a dangerous voyage, the business partners arrived in Hopewell Cape, near present-day Moncton.
So Uniacke settled eventually in Cumberland County, which is near present-day Moncton area, Fort Sackville area, kind of the border of New Brunswick and Sackville. Moses said, "I'm looking for bright young men to help me with a settlement in Nova Scotia, and we would love for you to come work with us." So he did.
While working as an agent, Richard fell in love with and married his business partner's 12-year-old daughter, Martha Maria, on May 3, 1775, in Hopewell Township, New Brunswick, and they would go on to have 5 sons and 6 daughters. In 1776, Richard joined the American rebels in the Battle of Fort Cumberland under the leadership of Jonathan Eddy. They besieged Fort Cumberland and pillaged whoever remained loyal to the British. Richard was arrested and sent to Halifax to be tried for treason.
The love of his life, Martha, she died before Uniacke Estate was built, but she always knew that he wanted to build an estate there. He had purchased over 12,000 acres of land, and his dream had been to build the estate at where it is today, because when he was working for Martha's father, Moses, and got involved in that settlement that he was constructing up there, he was involved in the Eddy Rebellion and was accused of treason. We don't know exactly what he did, but he was accused of treason and put under arrest and was being brought back to Halifax. And at that time, they were traveling along the Post Road, which was one of 2 main roads in Nova Scotia. And they stopped to water the horses, and Uniacke looked upon the land and said, "This reminds me of my home in Ireland, and I will one day build my estate here." And you can only imagine the reaction of the soldiers who were accompanying him, thinking, "Okay, sure, sure you are." So anyway, they made it back to Halifax, and he was let go on those charges of treasons, presumably because of his family connections. He had that wealthy family back in Ireland who held some pretty prominent positions. So he may have gotten away with it because of that. So at that time, Moses said to Richard, maybe, things are not so good here. Maybe you should go back to Ireland.
In 1777, Richard returned to Ireland.
So Richard John went back to Ireland, finished his law degree there, and that was when he found out that he had been disinherited by his father. He had none of the family wealth to back him up. He still had the education and the family connections, but he didn't have the money anymore. So he came back to Nova Scotia to get back with his wife Martha, and she gave birth to his oldest son Norman.
Richard was admitted to the bar on April 3, 1781, and used his connections to help him be appointed Solicitor General. He would go on to hold many different political positions, including being elected to the House of Assembly in 1783 for Sackville Township. But the role he was most well known for was Attorney General. He was appointed in 1797 and held the position for 30 years. Richard became very wealthy in his own right, but never forgot his passion for progress. He took up many causes, including religious reform, and drafted a bill allowing Catholics to own land, build churches, and hire priests. Richard was also one of the founding members of the Charitable Irish Society of Halifax, which was established in 1785 to assist Irish people regardless of whether they were Protestant or Catholic. Over the years, he also put forward amendments to the laws to allow Catholics to establish schools and vote in elections, and his efforts led to the Roman Catholic Relief Act of 1829. Richard also fought against slavery in Nova Scotia and defeated John de Lacy as part of a larger movement to abolish slavery across the British Empire, resulting in the Slavery Abolition Act of 1833. Joanne said he did all of this from his home in Halifax at the corner of Sackville Street and Argyle Street, which today is the home to the Convention and Trade Center.
It used to be a historic hole in the ground, but then was formerly the home of the Halifax newspaper, the Chronicle Herald building. So Uniacke lived in Halifax, wanted to build his large estate, and in 1815 he realized that dream.
Sadly, his wife Martha never got to see it because she died in 1803 at the age of 40 after a tedious and painful illness. Every year on Martha's birthday, Richard would spend the day remembering all the wonderful things about his first wife.
He named it Mount Uniacke after his grandfather's home in Ireland, a grandfather that he respected a lot and a grandfather that encouraged him to follow the path that he wanted to follow. So he built Mount Uniacke, and the town is named Mount Uniacke after the home that Richard John built. Because when Richard John built that home, he built it 27 miles outside of Halifax along the Post Road, a very well-traveled road. He built it as a statement piece. He wanted all of the travelers who passed by to see his grand home kind of as a look at how successful I've become. I started with nothing because he was disinherited and worked his way up. He was very proud of that because at the time that Richard John Uniacke was climbing the ladder, the loyalists from America were coming up to Nova Scotia after the Revolution. And they were all vying for the same political positions. Richard John Uniacke would become famous for his eloquence and wit in the courtroom. They used to say that nobody knew the law better than he did. And one of the things that he did was he compiled all of the laws and legislations of Nova Scotia into a book called the Nova Scotia Laws that would become used by lawyers and anyone working with the law until about 1851 when it was all revised. But that was the code that people followed. And like I said, nobody knew the law better than Richard John Uniacke. So he built his country estate, used it as his summer home from 1815 until his death in 1830.
The three-story Georgian-style home has gleaming white exterior, beautifully complemented by deep green shutters and tall adjoining windows. Approaching the front of the house with its stately pillared portico, visitors would have been impressed by the beauty and grandeur of the place. Making an impression is what Uniacke intended, and even now, nearly 2 centuries later, the same sight can only take one's breath away. Joanne said it's breathtaking, yet welcoming.
You travel down the laneway and all of a sudden you round this corner and you come out through the woods and there's a large field in front of you and the estate in front of you. So what you see are 4 pillars, a triangular portico on the top, the pediment room, and this grand home, and then the lake to the left. And it's exactly what Richard John wanted everybody to see when they came, this grand home. There's also a barn on the property that's original to the estate and a carriage house as well. There were so many other outbuildings, but they've since been torn down with age or not survived to the time when the family sold it to the museum. So the estate was built, it's known as one of the finest examples of Georgian architecture in Canada, essentially. It is a 3-story mansion, basically, a large white building, Georgian style, meaning it has a central hallway and rooms on either side. So there's an entrance on the back for the staff of the family, and today that functions as the entrance to the museum. So when you come in, you're entering into the basement level, which was the kitchens. Home of the largest, or the only fireplace in the home. One other thing about Richard John was that he was a man ahead of his times. He had heard that wood stoves were more efficient for heating a home than fireplaces, so he had 9 wood stoves installed throughout the house. So when you come in, there's the kitchen, the fireplace, and it's the area that's the most changed in the house. When you go up to the main level of the home, you're stepping back in time. It's essentially the way it was when the Uniacke family lived there. There's the central hallway, the dining room and the drawing room on one side of the hall, and the dining room and library on one side, and the drawing room and guest bedroom on the other side. And then you follow the staircase up to about 6 or 7 different bedrooms upstairs.
Today, when you enter the home, it feels untouched by time, as most of the original family furnishings, old family portraits, and personal belongings can be found inside. Outside, visitors can explore the sprawling 930 hectares. The estate, which is also one of the few remaining examples of English landscape garden design, a fashionable gardening style from colonial British North America. The home was passed down and remained a family home for over a century.
So it was lived in until 1949, mainly as a summer home. And in 1949, the family decided that they didn't have the wealth of the previous generations and could no longer afford the upkeep. So they sold it to the province in 1949 to become a museum. And they sold the house and all of its contents. So everything in the house is original to the Uniacke family. A lot of it is original to the time of Richard John, so 1815 era. When he built the house, he furnished it with furniture from George Adams, a cabinet maker in England.
Joanne Peppers has been overseeing the operations for Uniacke Museum Estate Park since 2014. And while she is dedicated to preserving the history, visitors are often curious about one thing.
One of the most popular questions is the house haunted? So I and my colleagues like to say, if it is haunted, they're very friendly. We've never had any scary or negative stories, but the family has a lot of stories about ghosts and hauntings at the estate. They were as far back as 1927, when they were featured in an article from Canadian Home and Gardens magazine. It was noted that the guest bedroom was the spooky bedroom. They noted that all houses have a home, or all old houses have a spooky room, or a room that's supposed to be the spooky one. And the guest bedroom was the one that the family called the spooky room. And that was mainly because no one would ever sleep there for more than one night in a row. The guest would come and they would sleep the first night, and then they would hear footsteps around them. And as soon as they would get up and open the door to see what was going on, there'd be nobody there.
Richard died in his bedroom, and it is believed that his spirit is still keeping watch over his beloved summer home.
The family assumed that it was the footsteps of Richard John or his oldest daughter, Lady Mary. Lady Mary spent a lot of time in the house. Her husband died quite early in their marriage, leaving her widowed with an infant daughter to take care of. And as was the tradition of the time, she would go back and live with her father. Young women were not allowed to live by themselves, so she went on to live with her father and spent a lot of time at the estate, and as did her daughter, also named Martha. There are a lot of Marthas in the family. So little Martha grew up at the estate with her mother, Lady Mary. And although Eliza was Richard John's second wife and the lady of the home, Lady Mary shared hosting responsibilities at the estate. So if they were hosting, she would be one of the ones to greet visitors at the estate. So these footsteps that they would hear in the hall, they presumed to be Lady Mary or Richard John. And why they returned, nobody really knows.
Joanne said Lady Mary moved in with her daughter, Martha, after the death of her husband.
She married Vice Admiral Andrew Mitchell, and he was a Knight of Bath, so he was known as Sir Andrew Mitchell. So when Lady Mary married Sir Andrew, she became Lady Mary Mitchell. And the interesting thing about their wedding, they got married on May 5th, which happened to be the anniversary of their parents, Richard John and Martha, and two other siblings. So it was a three-person wedding. So Lady Mary and Sir Andrew, Crofton and his wife Dorothea, and Martha and her husband, Thomas Jeffrey. So they all got married at St. Paul's Church on the anniversary of their parents' marriage.
She lived with her father and would often share hosting duties with her mother-in-law, Eliza. Sadly, Lady Mary passed away in 1895 at the age of 43 in her bedroom, and since then, many believe she never left.
So Lady Mary, she makes her presence known too in a few different stories. People have said that they've seen Lady Mary and her mother Martha at the piano that's in the drawing room, playing the piano, one of them sitting and one of them standing next to them. So that's a common one. Another one, Lady Mary had her own bedroom upstairs, and her daughter's room was a connecting room next to hers. So the connecting room, you can only get to it through the different bedrooms in the house. You can't get to it straight from the hallway. It became known as the coward's room because, again, anyone who spent the night in that room would never spend more than one night there because they would feel the temperature would drop. It would get really cold. So they would wake up and they would feel somebody touching them. They would feel someone touching their face. They presume that was Lady Mary coming to check up on her daughter at nighttime, keeping an eye on her. After Lady Mary passed away, she went under the care of her grandfather, Richard John Uniacke. So she continued to live in the house and stay with Richard John. So they presume that Lady Mary comes in to check up on her daughter.
Once Lady Mary passed, her father afforded her daughter everything a young lady would need, including a pianoforte, a music stand, and a few chairs for entertaining. Richard's first wife, Martha, was often seen standing by the pianoforte, while others have witnessed her ghost walking by the lake that bears her name. Martha had died long before the house was completed, but her family believed she stayed behind to watch over them. It seemed to them Martha wasn't the only family member doing that. Joanne said that for generations, those who lived in the house claimed to feel eyes following them while they ate.
There were a couple of dining room stories. The first one is about the portrait that hangs there of Richard John's grandfather, Captain James Uniacke. They referred to him as Old Sly Boots, and they could feel like his eyes were following them around the room. So no matter what spot you sat in, it always felt like Old Sly Boots was watching you. They also used to say that they could hear footsteps again in the hallway, but the footsteps always stopped short of the dining room door. And when they would look, they could see nobody there. And they also assumed that that was Richard John Uniacke, keeping an eye out on the house and making sure everyone was following the protocol and the rules of the day. People also used to claim that they could smell cigar smoke in the library. That was another popular one. Cigar smoke in the library and smelling perfume throughout the house, like a lady's floral perfume.
Scents that linger are a common way to know spirits could be around. Joanne says that in the library, among many original knickknacks and gadgets Richard John Uniacke had purchased in London, many believe that his spirit still lingers.
Yes, so the library is actually one of my favorite rooms in the house, mainly because there are over 800 books there that are original to the Uniacke family, many of them from Richard John's time, and of course others added throughout the generations. But you'll find his large green reading chair in that room. Another thing about Uniacke was that he was a very tall presence. He was about 6'2". And then you add his top hat on top of that, and he was a very tall, imposing gentleman. And apparently his sons were also all very tall men. So his large green reading chair is there, his writing desk, and a few of his scientific equipment pieces. He collected them. He purchased a static electric machine, a barometer, a vacuum pump, and a sundial, which is actually on our lawn today, a replica of that. So it's quite an outstanding room, essentially. But yes, that is the room that people smell cigar smoke in. He was a fan of snuff. He always carried a snuff box with him. His portrait actually has his snuff box in it. He's holding it in his hand. He once went to a party and had to leave because he forgot his snuff box, so he had to go back and get it. So he liked snuff, as did a lot of gentlemen of that era. And snuff is a tobacco product.
Richard would delight guests by using the static electric machine to make their hair stand on end, generate mild electric shocks, and make bells ring. Some believe the sound of bells can still be heard. Richard's spirit doesn't seem to be constrained to his summer house either. Many believe the house in Halifax, at the corner of Sackville and Argyle Street, was also haunted.
After he passed away, his son would continue to live in the house, Andrew, the youngest son with Eliza. And he sold the house, and it was eventually torn down. And the Chronicle Herald newspaper building was built there. And the staff swore that Richard John and his family were still present. People talked about seeing apparitions of Richard John wandering through the house, and also his wife, Lady Mary. Yeah, so you can imagine a man wearing his top hat and long-tailed coats, and just, that presence of a tall, eloquent man walking around and, just watching over you as you worked at your desk.
Newspaper staff saw Richard and Lady Mary, but they would encounter others as well.
They did, yeah. Really, a lot of the members of the family. The women in particular, there were a few stories of seeing ladies in gowns of the era, kind of walking around the halls again. So Martha and Lady Mary are the key individuals that people assume that they were.
Although Richard had a few other daughters, they don't seem to be mentioned as the haunting presences of either of the estates. However, his son Crofton had a strange premonition as a child about his uncle, and that story has been passed down as well.
So he passed this story on to his son, who would later tell other people in the family. Crofton was in his sleep, had fallen asleep, and then all of a sudden he could smell the salty sea air, and it felt really cold. So he opened his eyes and he saw a man standing there next to him. This man was dripping wet, like he had just walked out of the sea. And as soon as Crofton could kind of just see this image, he realized that's Uncle Moses. And then all of a sudden he was gone. And a few days later in the mail, there came a letter to say that Uncle Moses had passed away. He had been presumed dead after a shipwreck in the Bay of Fundy. Crofton died in the house, again peacefully in his sleep, in the same bedroom as his father passed away in. And Richard John Uniacke's mother-in-law, Eleanor, also passed away in the house. So although Martha didn't get to see the home, Martha's mother lived in the home with Richard John and the family.
The Uniacke Museum Estate is a popular destination for local school groups and those interested in exploring its many walking trails. But as Joanne said, and many of the staff know, the history of the home is filled with more than antique furniture. Some say the creak of the floorboards is just old timber cooling in the night. Others swear they are the careful and deliberate footsteps of its former owners. The sense that you're being watched comes not with malice, but with memory. Maybe the ghosts of Uniacke Estate aren't here to frighten us. Maybe they linger because this place remembers them, and history doesn't always rest quietly. Sometimes it whispers. Thank you for joining me as we explored the historic and haunted Uniacke Museum Estate, and a special thank you to Joanne Peppers, Regional Coordinator, for taking the time to talk with me. I really do appreciate it. Haunted Canada is sponsored by the Edmonton Ghost Tours. I will link it in the show notes. Haunted Canada is written and produced by me, Nadine Bailey, with senior producer Dila Velasquez. Production and sound design is by Rob Johnston, with help from Roslyn Kufer. If you would like to support this podcast, please follow us, share, and tell a friend about this podcast. We would also appreciate a like and a 5-star written review. Also, you can follow me on our different social media platforms, including TikTok and my YouTube channel, Haunted Canada. Or, if you have a ghost story, haunting, or true crime that you would like for us to cover on this podcast, please email me through the website, hauntedcanada.com. Thank you from all of us at Haunted Canada and Curious Cast. Have a good night, everyone, and stay haunted.